This video, I'm going to compare the Dumb and Dumber franchise to the Poltergeist franchise. These are both great examples of franchises that started off with a great first movie, and then there were movies afterward that aren't very good. And actually, in both cases, I've only seen the first movie. In fact, Poltergeist is one of these great examples of a franchise that started off with a great movie that did not actually lay a good foundation for a franchise, that didn't end in a way that left things dangling that could be continued in follow-up movies, could be continued in a sequel. In the case of Dumb and Dumber, comedy tends to be a bit more timely, leans a bit more toward lightning in a bottle. After that first film, everything else just feels like the filmmakers trying to recapture the lightning in a bottle magic they had with that first film, not succeeding in doing so. First of all, when you look at highest Rotten Tomatoes score for each franchise, in the case of Poltergeist, unsurprisingly, that first movie has the highest score of 88%. When you look at Dumb and Dumber, the first movie, unsurprisingly, has the highest score of 68%. I personally think that's a bit low for a movie like Dumb and Dumber, which I've always found to be really funny. It's one of my top 3 favorite comedies, but admittedly, comedy is subjective. Poltergeist wins this first round. Then when you look at lowest score for each franchise, in the case of Dumb and Dumber, the prequel film When Harry Met Lloyd only has a 10%. Then with Poltergeist, the lowest score is a 16% for Poltergeist Free. Poltergeist wins this round. Then when you look at average score, Poltergeist only barely beats Dumb and Dumber because Poltergeist has an average of 38, whereas Dumb and Dumber has an average of 36. Then when you look at gap between lowest and highest score, with Poltergeist, lowest score 16, highest score 78, 88, I mean, so you have a gap of 72. Then when you look at Dumb and Dumber, highest score is 68, lowest score is 10. So you have a gap of 58, meaning that Dumb and Dumber actually does win this round because the gap's a bit lower. But Poltergeist is already going to win this debate, regardless of my personal opinion. But let's look at it now. As I was saying early on in this video, in each of these cases, I've only seen the first film. Aside from Poltergeist, I think that Taken, Jaws are also great examples of cases where the people up at Hollywood wanted to do more movies because of how successful the first film was. But because of that, they didn't stop to think, wait a minute, does this movie that was a hit actually lay a good foundation for a franchise? Is this a premise that naturally lends itself to more sequels? Or is it a premise for a great standalone movie, but one that doesn't naturally lend itself to follow-up movies, to a continuation? So what this really comes down to is the question of, what movie do I like more, Dumb and Dumber or Poltergeist? I think both of these movies are great, but the difference is, however, I have only seen Poltergeist once, whereas I have rewatched Dumb and Dumber multiple times. It's one of my favorite comedies out there. I'm not sure if Poltergeist is one of my favorite horror films. I could easily say that it is, but I think at the end of the day, I personally have to choose Dumb and Dumber in this case, actually, because I find that movie to be so funny. I've seen it multiple times. I remember it more, as you can imagine, when compared to Poltergeist. In the case of Jaws, actually, I remember I saw the first Jaws after not having seen it before not too long ago, sometime within the last few years, recent enough that I distinctly remember watching it. Haven't yet seen any of the other movies. In the case of Poltergeist, I think that first film is a great example of entry level horror where it's not as intense as other horror films. It's only rated PG. It's not violent in the same way that Nightmare on Elm Street is. It's not the same as R-rated horror slasher or R-rated religious horror film like The Omen or Exorcist, or R-rated sci-fi horror like Alien, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing. I think Poltergeist really well done. You have an engaging story here about this family moving to a town, and then they learn that their house was built on top of a cemetery. I think one of the big problems with Poltergeist Freeze specifically is the movie just makes the Freeling family look really bad. That for some reason, after everything the family went through, they decide to send their parents decide to send their daughter to this place with people there who don't believe what happened to her really happened to her. And so you're like, oh, wow, that is a very irresponsible move on your guys' part. The first movie, I think the visuals are good. I like the free lanes, are interesting characters. It was a really well done movie. I can't think of any problems I have with it off the top of my head. That'll be it for this video today.